Hi, it's Therese and it's time to Give Me 5 with Penny Black. Now today I have 5 same but different cards, and as you can see they are all quite similar, but there is something different about each of them. I've used the Vase Garden stamp set. This is a red rubber cling stamp and I've stamped it out 5 times, and what I've decided to do is actually colour it in 5 different mediums. I have a book that I keep all my colours in so that I know what I've got, and I can actually just sort of flick through it and find colours that I think are the ones that I want to use. As today I wanted to use very similar sort of tones just to make the comparison that little bit easier. Alright, so I'm going to start with Copics. I thought I'd start with the easy one, because to me Copics are my go-to colouring medium, and before pencils they're always first on my list. And I don't have every Copic colour because I don't think you need them, but what I love about them is the way they blend. They're really easy to use once you kind of get a little grasp on them, and you can make them as complex or as simple as you want. There are some incredible colorists out there that can really bring this medium to life, and I tend not to get too caught up in making everything too real, although I do like to add shading. It is something that I want to practice, of course, because why wouldn't you want to get better and have more fun with what you've got? But it's a medium that looks good, and especially when I'm doing something like this where I'm colouring up 5 different cards, you get to see 5 lots of colouring today of the same image in the same colours. You might get quite bored. We'll see anyway. We'll see if you're here at the end. I've got some Nina 80-pound cardstock, and all my card panels are cut to the same size as my card front, and that's what I thought I'd just begin with. I used my Misty to stamp them all out. I've stamped this one in some Memento Tuxedo Black, and when I'm colouring with my Copics I like to often do my shading first, like the shaded or my darkest colour first, and then come in and blend it out. But sometimes I'll actually come in with my lighter colour, then add my shading, and then come back in and blend. And I don't know why. I just do it differently. But, you know, it all seems to work for me, and I really like colouring with this medium. I only wish I could colour this fast. I try not to overblend. I used to overblend my Copic colouring too much, and I actually like it a little bit messy now. You might have noticed. And that's my first card for today. My second one is this medium. Doesn't look much different. This is my Prismacolor pencils, but that was actually coloured with the Prismacolors in the similar tones, and I find that these blend beautifully, especially when I'm using a nice smooth cardstock like this one. I'm using the Nina 80-pound again. I thought this is a fairly new cardstock to me, so I am still getting used to it. I do like it, and it's now available to us in Australia. We've always had a bit of trouble getting it here, and I really like that it has the matching 110-pound cardstock that I can use for a card base, and I know the whites are going to be really matchy-matchy. But the smooth finish, if the finish is too smooth with pencils, sometimes you can struggle to add the extra layers that you need to for shading and depth, because pencils need a tooth to kind of grab hold of, or hold to, grab hold of on the cardstock. I don't know, is that right? Anyway, so the tooth is, the more tooth, the more, technically the more pencil you're going to be able to lay down. The trick is not to colour it too heavily. So the Prismacolors do leave a waxy build-up, kind of what they call a bloom, and that can sort of cover over your outlines. And I did want to stamp everything with the black outline today just to keep it a little bit similar. But what I did with all of my images is came back and re-stamped them again. I left my image in place in the Misty and came back and stamped them all with the Onyx Black ink at the end. So that just crisped up all of the outlines. What I love the most about Prismas though is that you can actually, as long as you don't press too hard and fill the tooth in with the paper, you can actually keep coming in and adding other shades. You don't need every colour of these either, because you can actually blend these colours to get the colours that you want. I'm going to put the link below to my blog post, and I will have a list of the exact names of the mediums that I've used today. So say on these Prismas I'll have a list of all the Prismacolor pencils that I used to create this image. I'll have all the numbers of my Copics listed there as well. So you just have to go into the description below, and you'll also see a stack of photos of all of these images before and after I put them together, just so if you wanted to compare them, because it's a bit hard in the video to sort of pause it. I mean, you can pause it and have a look, but photos I find a little bit easier. So here's a medium I am learning. I'm really enjoying watercoloring at the moment, and my biggest problem is I overwork it. So I'm trying not to overwork it, and I'm a little bit impatient, so don't ever give me any kind of medium like what do you call it? Oh, why have I gone blank? That's ridiculous. Oil colour. Don't ever give me a medium like oil colours, because I heard they can take days to dry. I can't even wait a few minutes for this one to dry. But I did, and mostly some of the places I didn't wait long enough and they did blend, but that's okay. Watercolouring is very forgiving. That's what paper towel's for. You can actually remove some of the colour and also re-add colour once it's dry. I did actually use similar colours throughout. I know it gets a little bit boring, but it does make comparison a little bit better. The great thing about watercolours is you can create your own colours. You only need your primaries and you can go for it. But that does take a lot of experience, and I don't have that, so I love the fact that I have the watercolour colours that I need. This is done on some watercolour cardstock. It's the Arches, I can't remember which one, but it will be linked. And I did struggle stamping this with my Misty, but I still wanted to keep it in the black ink, so it was worth it for the finished product to look so similar. Next is another favourite medium of mine, and it's not one that I use as much as I should. I keep my pencils in the drawer. This is my Inktense pencils, and I have a really large set of these, and these are going to last me for absolutely ever. If you've ever used Inktense pencils, you'll know that the colour is very intense. What I like to do is actually draw some light colour onto the cardstock. Sometimes I'll add a bit of shading before I add my water, but the other way I like to add colour with Inktense is directly off the pencil itself. So I have a wet brush that I touch to the tip of the pencil and then drop my colour in that way. The thing with Inktense is less is best, and I used some Bristol cardstock here today. So it's a white smooth cardstock, and this works really well with Inktense pencils. One other thing to note with Inktense is that it is permanent. So once it dries, it won't shift. So not like some of the other watercolors and that where you can, or even like the distressings where you can shift the color after it's dried. This is permanent, and that's good and bad depending on what you want to do. But you can always come in and add other mediums on top, which is great. Even Copics or pencils, other pencils like Prismacolor pencils, whatever you want. And because you don't need much water to activate these, it's great just to come in and you can always add more layers of colour of Inktense pencils on top as well. Just like I'm doing here with I thought the flowers needed to be a little bit brighter. So my last one of the colouring here is the Zigs, and I think these turned out the brightest of all. I'm also on the Bristol Smooth cardstock here, and I find these less forgiving. I like to work in smaller areas, and that way I just find if I try and do too big an area, it's harder to blend them. And I'm just dipping my brush in the water and trying not to add too much water with these as well. And once they're dry, they don't activate very easily either, which can be good and bad as well. I don't have a lot of, I think I've got the 60 set, which is a fairly large set of zigs, but the colours, there aren't a lot of muted colours in this. I mean, I could have drawn them off on a block and picked up less of the colour, but I just wanted to try and make the colours that I had work. The other thing I do with zigs is, like on the top of the jar there, I don't actually come back in and watercolour it out. Because it has got a brush, I can actually make it look painterly without actually having to come in and reactivate it with the brush. Really bright colours, but pretty too. And I did come in and add a little bit of shading at the end with one of the greys, and that sort of mutes it down and adds the shading for the images, and I think makes it look a little bit more similar to the other images as well. All of the images I grounded with the grey, and I like to go a little bit higher than the jar, come back in with a couple of different greys, and that works well for me. So there's the comparison between the Copics, Prismacolor, Inktense, Watercolor and the zigs. These three are the watercolory ones. Now it's time to put my cards together. I'll do this very quickly today. I added a bundled sage watercolor background to the panel, and then I decided to flick some black sort of splatter over the back as well, and then just added that to the front of my top fold card. I did add a lot of adhesive because it's a watercolor panel, and a sentiment, which is a tag from the gift card pocket and Happy Snippets set, and a bow. The next one's probably my most simple card design. The Copic one I just left as it was and added a Happy Snippets heat embossed sentiment. I wasn't happy, it was just from the Snippets set. This is the zig one. I die cut a tag from the tagged die set, added lots of adhesive to the front of my card, and then adhered the panel down, popped up the tag and added a hugs sentiment from Love Expressions. And this one is the Inktense pencils. I added it directly to a card. No, I didn't. I popped it up on the front of a card with a small border, added a smile sentiment from Heartfelt and some black glitter glass to the center of the flowers. My final one is a little bit more complex. I did an antique frame die for the Prismacolor panel, sat it on some summertime paper pad just directly on the card front, and then popped up a sentiment white heat embossed from the Happy Snippets set. And that's my finished cards for today. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll link everything below. Don't forget to subscribe and to like my video. I'll be back again real soon. Till next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.